It's a great pleasure to introduce this workshop, Developing an Evidence-Led Essential Research Skills Training Curriculum. My name is Dermot Maher, and I'm here with my colleague Pascal Launois, both of us from TDR. That's the short form for a very long name, the Special Program for Tropical Disease Research and Training, based here in Geneva in Switzerland. And we're very pleased to co-host with the Global Health Network this stakeholder review workshop, which represents a culmination of an extensive set of development activities. And we're very grateful to the Oxford Global Health Network for very diligently carrying through a very rigorous process. And what we're hoping to achieve at the end of this process, including at the end of this workshop, is that we will have identified the minimum set of skills, knowledge, and key principles that people need to undertake high quality research for health. So the question may come, why is TDR collaborating with the Global Health Network in developing this training curriculum? Well, TDR and the Global Health Network, we have a strong track record of working together, including in developing a framework of core competencies in clinical research that the training curriculum that we're working on now builds on. For TDR, the training curriculum will be a very valuable means of helping us to achieve our TDR goals in strengthening capacity for research on infectious diseases of poverty in disease endemic countries and making a difference to the lives of many people. So with those short words of introduction, welcome. We look forward to a very productive, energetic and interactive workshop with live voting. Trudy's very excited about being the monitor for live voting. And with that, welcome everybody, and over to Trudy.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's really great to see you all here on this workshop. Obviously, the usual apologies for not being face-to-face. It would have been great to have had this meeting in person. So this today really is the result of over 2 years work we've been doing with many of you on this call. And so it's really exciting to have this occasion to pull the data together and take you through this last step. And this is still part of the research study, which is a really important point to make. As Dermot kindly outlined, the whole idea here is to try and look across the whole landscape of health research, especially in places and settings where research is hardly ever happening, or there's not really much capacity that's existing at the moment, and look at what would be the essential set of skills that we would all want to put into those settings for research to be undertaken really well. So just a few guiding principles from me that brought this together, and then I'll hand over to the team to take you through the data so far. When we set out on this, we very deliberately have been thinking about research as the whole spectrum of health research. So absolutely not, but definitely including clinical trials, because we came at this years ago around the thinking that if you really want to embed health research capabilities within any given healthcare setting, that should be all types of study, observation, epidemiology, clinical trials, social science, public health surveillance, all of those elements are really key. And we knew that before, right? When we've all many of us come to this from working on many different diseases and working in different settings. And then of course, we've totally come to understand that, obviously not just with COVID, but also those of us who've been involved with outbreak research before, and seeing that when you have a new pathogen appear, you need to answer all those questions all in the same instant. And all of those studies need quality data with a trained, capable team collecting them. And I think the last point I'd like to make on that is we're really moving away from the really old approaches of capacity development and thinking about how do we create lasting, capable teams that are able to lead their own research and become internationally competitive teams in their own right. And so this is very much part of that thinking about embedding that crucial skill set that people can build on and go forward and become lasting, capable teams long into the future. So we approach this research very much looking at that whole ecosystem and ask this series of questions. So the data that you're about to be taken through has been gathered over a few years across different groups, as you'll hear. And the step we're asking you to do today, which is why we sent you your homework, was the first group of people, the whole community we're all working with. And we've got data from over 7,000 people, and now we've brought you guys together as a team of experts, and you've come to this as either research leaders, funders, policymakers, somebody from perhaps one of the health organisations that's sort of driving and thinking all of this work. And so we brought you together to ask some really crucial questions of this data, really around how applicable it is for what we're trying to do, and also to see what we can do and how we can implement it in the long term. So I won't say any more for now, because I want to hand it over to the team to talk you through the data. But just to remind you, we're here as part of the study, and we've got a really important job today in considering these findings so far and how we take them forward to the next step. So I shall hand it over to my colleagues. Thanks again for taking part. And at any point, do write down your thoughts in the Q&A section as you'll hear in a minute. And so I'll come back after you've been taken through the data when we get on with the work we've got to do today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Trudy. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I hope you can all hear me well. My name is Arantxa de la Horra, and my role at the Global Health Network is to coordinate the research projects. I will spend the next few minutes providing an overview of the process we have followed for developing an evidence-led essential research skills training curriculum. Next slide, please. As it's been mentioned by Dermot and Trudy, the aim of our project is to find consensus on what constitutes the minimum set of skills, knowledge, and key principles that would enable those without previous experience, and thus key, to undertake high-quality research for health. So our aim is to identify the basic research skills that would be required in any type of research to provide a foundation. This does not mean that researchers would not need specialist training for different projects. Next slide, please. We designed a three-stage approach. The first stage was knowledge gap analysis. The second stage was the Delphi technique. And the third stage is today, a stakeholder ratification workshop. Next. The Delphi first stage was to produce a list of potential essential research skills. Next slide. To identify this list of essential research skills, we reviewed and analyzed survey results and feedback from 7,167 researchers from 153 countries. This data was collected between 2017 and 2019. These participants were, in some cases, independent researchers, and some were partners from the two preparedness networks that we work with, Ready and Alert. The kind of surveys data that we analyzed was from research training needs surveys and feedback from research workshops, and e-learning feedback as well collected from the network. We compiled the data and conducted quantitative and qualitative analysis, and we identified 98 essential research skill themes from the researchers' responses, and these would become the categories for the Delphi round surveys. Next slide, please. Once we identified a list of potential essential research skills, we moved to stage 2, the Delphi technique. The Delphi technique is a consensus building method that gathers experts to discuss issues. The process goes through a series of cycles. In each cycle, a panel of experts is presented with a set of statements to rate, in our case was the themes, and feedback is then given that shows how each individual ratings compare to the group ratings. One of the main advantages of the Delphi technique is that a large number of individuals across diverse locations and across diverse areas of expertise can be included anonymously, and this way avoiding domination of consensus process by one or few experts. Next slide, please. Our first step for the Delphi was to identify the panelists that would review the themes identified in the knowledge gap analysis. We identified panelists by two methods. One was crowdsourcing and targeted invitation. We aimed for our panel to be formed by both experts and stakeholders in health research and health research training, with a heterogeneous expertise and from different diverse geographical regions. We had a really good number of expression of interest. We had 554, and we invited 63 research experts. Based on the research expertise, we invited to take part in round 1 414, and from those, we had a response in round 1 of 254. We were aiming, when we were inviting these panelists, to include the views of researchers, research training facilitators, members of research advisory committees, research funders, authors of peer review research training papers, authors of research training books or programs, journal editors, research policy makers and regulators, and research participants. We also conducted pilots to both Delphi rounds, and as I mentioned, the first Delphi survey was completed by 254 panelists, and the second by 222, giving us an 80% retention rate between the Delphi rounds, which is we especially appreciate this response rate given the timing and the difficulties that COVID was causing around the world. If you note, if you can see on your screen, they were all done around spring and summertime of this year. Next slide, please. This figure illustrates the distribution of the different panelists' research roles against their country of work classification by World Bank income groups. To facilitate interpretation, we grouped the panelists into 4 categories. These categories are expert, stakeholder, member of research team, and other. Other can include students and research participants, and those that classify themselves as other. As you can see in this graph, there was a low representation of stakeholders, and this is why this workshop has been organized to gather your views and opinions. Next slide, please. This slide shows the evolution of the themes that we identified. We started with the 98 themes identified in the knowledge gap analysis, and in Delphi survey round 1, themes were scored based on 2 dimensions. One was relevance, should we include this category of skill at all? And this was evaluated using a 7-point Likert scale. And we also scored these themes on clarity. Is it clear what the theme reflects? The results that we had from in round 1, regarding relevance, 43 themes achieved a level of consensus for inclusion of 85% or more. These themes were deemed to not require further evaluation by the panelist. Regarding clarity, we had 90 themes considered clear, and 8 themes that they had a clarity rating of less than 80%, and those were included in round 2. We also identified 10 new themes in this round indicated by the panelists, and all the themes, all the groups highlighted in yellow were reviewed in round 2. In addition, we used hierarchical cluster analysis with the round 1 scores to determine whether there were any obvious patterns in responding related to country income classifications, years of experience in research, current role, and gender. No obvious clusters were identified which would support the generality of the findings. In round 2, themes were scored on a yes-no nominal scale for both relevance and clarity. Next slide, please. The level of agreement between experts and panelists has been translated into levels of recommendations for inclusion in the essential research skills training curriculum. The levels will be as follows. You can see the dark green color means a level of consensus of between 175%, and that equals a strong recommendation. The lighter green color means level of consensus between 74% and 65%. That's a medium recommendation. And the light orange color is a level of consensus of less than 65%, and that means a weak recommendation. Bonnie will now present our proposal for themes grouping.
Thanks, Arantxa, and good afternoon, everyone. So we're now going to share with you how we've subsequently grouped these themes generated from the previous stages in the study, which Arantxa has just spoken about, into the proposed framework of a curriculum. Next slide. So the proposed framework for the top level grouping of the themes is illustrated here. And as you can see, it includes 13 suggested parent modules. So we have research principles, research methodology, protocol design, study setup, ethics, running the research project, community engagement, governance and regulation, research data management and sharing, research laboratories, the research team, study close, and research uptake. And what we mean by this particular concept is how to make a difference with your study findings. And just to help visualize and think through these grouped concepts, we've presented the modules here viewing research as more of a dynamic system rather than a strictly linear process. So please note, we're not suggesting or emphasizing a particular order or hierarchy to these modules. So with that in mind, let's now briefly explore each module presented here. Next slide. Great. So firstly, the module entitled Research Principles. This is informed by 9 themes. We've listed the titles of all 13 parent modules down the left-hand side, just as a useful reference as we work through these. And as a reminder, the percentages next to each theme indicate the level of consensus reached by the Delphi panel to include these in the curriculum. And the color coding applies a level of recommendation, for which the legend features below. So as you can see, all themes listed here under research principles met with strong recommendation for inclusion. And what we can also see is the level of consensus expressed by the Delphi panel indicates a strong need for looking at the fundamentals of good research in the conceptualization stage, including the theme's concept of health research, identifying a research gap, and the development of a research question. Next slide. So the next module is research methodology. And this is the densest of the module groupings with a grand total of 22 themes. And from the nature of these themes, participants indicated a significant focus on actually defining and understanding the remit of various study designs, such as clinical trials and epidemiological studies as listed. Determining the most suitable and applicable approach to answer a specific research question was also apparent, and we can see this indicated here with 93% consensus achieved for covering the various quantitative and qualitative data collection methods, closely followed with strong consensus for the different sampling techniques. What is interesting to note is the more moderate or weaker consensus established for certain fields of research, including methodology, health policy, social science, and health economics, which you can see in the lower reaches of the table. And in fact, health economics and operational research were among the 3 themes that scored the lowest level of consensus across all 108 themes, as determined by the panel. Now, perhaps this is due to limited representation across our Delphi panel within these disciplines, with only 36% of our panelists from a qualitative methods background. However, we would also be very interested to hear if you have any further insight or thoughts on this. And so please do feel free to offer any comments in the chat as we continue. Again, we are moving through these quite swiftly for the purposes of getting your input and feedback in the next session. So please do refer to your briefing paper if you would like to reread or revisit any of these module listings. The tables were provided within the paper for your reference. Next slide. So the module for protocol design was informed by the following 5 themes, all of which received a strong level of consensus above 85% and speak directly to the core considerations that shape and inform the development of this key document. So most notably recommended was identifying the target population and eligibility criteria at 94%. Now, this may feel like a short list when considering the parameters of the protocol and aspects that should be perhaps comprehensively included within a module titled protocol. However, these are the themes as determined by our participants, over 7,000 of them, and evaluated by the Delphi panel as to what is essential and what must be included, but not necessarily limited to. Next slide. So next we have a module labelled Study Setup that is underpinned by 7 themes. Study Setup developed from this series of themes that very much guide the practical steps for implementing a study. For example, developing the relevant site SOPs, the storage of research materials, and considerations for study-specific training, all listed here. So the Delphi panel also expressed strong consensus at 95% for including the theme related to the data collection tools required to capture the research data. And just to note, this theme fell within the top 4 most highly rated themes by the Delphi panel across the whole study. Also registering highly is writing a grant application, with 87% agreement that this should be included. Next slide. So here we have grouped a total of 8 themes to inform a module centered around ethics. 7 of these themes are within a level of strong recommendation. Most notably at the top of the table are those aspects which are critical to the rights and protection of participants, with 98% consensus achieved for including those key principles of informed consent and assent, in parallel with participant confidentiality and privacy, which also scored 98% consensus. Registering highly was also the conduct and storage of participant data, and it was also determined important to include the definition of vulnerable populations and the ethical implications for programs that seek to target this population for the purposes of research, as we can see here with 94% consensus. So it's important to share that these top 3 themes listed here for ethics were the most highly rated by the panel across the entire study. And if you were actually to add up all of the weightings for all of the themes listed here, the ethics module forms the strongest module from all 13. Next slide. So the following 4 themes are grouped to generate the governance and regulation module. And as a theme in its own right, research governance and regulation met with 83% consensus across the board of panelists, suggesting a strong need to cover the importance of the broad range of regulations, principles, and standards of good practice that ensure high quality research. Interestingly, the other 3 listed themes fell into the lower tier of recommendation, including quality management systems and medicine supply. And just to share a little further detail with you, the theme of medicine supply and regulation was identified by the panel as a new theme in round 1 of the Delphi. And again, if you have any views or further insight you'd be happy to share on these groupings or findings, please do offer your comments into the chat box. We welcome your feedback. Next slide. Running the research project very much draws on and groups the themes that speak to the project management aspects of a research study, with a focus on the operational skills for effectively progressing the study through the various phases and milestones to a successful conclusion. And we can see here strong consensus for research project management and planning at 88%, as well as budget management and time management, both registering with 79%. Panelists also highlighted the need to consider the mitigating circumstances, such as an outbreak scenario, and how to plan for such situations that could disrupt and impact on studies, as indicated with 75%. However, most highly agreed is the need to include the principles and importance of study reporting procedures and practices at the top with 91%. Now, the very nature of this module and a number of the themes grouped here could be considered strongly correlated with governance and regulation, as can be seen by the feature of monitoring and evaluation at 87% and reporting adverse events with 82%. Yet, in contrast, it's also interesting to note that the theme of audit met with such reduced consensus. Next slide. Obviously, a critical and important topic within research, this module is titled Community Engagement. A high level of consensus reached for all 5 themes listed here, and the inherent theme of community engagement principles and activities was most highly rated with 84% consensus. Again, this module would not necessarily be strictly limited to those themes listed here, but as determined by the previous 2 stages of the study, participants indicated these themes are important and should be included. And a further detail, actually just for interest, the top 3 themes listed were rated by panelists as unclear in round 1 of the Delphi, and therefore required the provision of further definitions in round 2 for improving clarity and understanding. Next slide. Okay, research data management and data sharing. So a total of 9 themes, 7 of which place a strong level of recommendation and emphasis on data capture, the storage and management of the research data, considerations for sharing data, as well as the analysis and presentation, so how to visualize your data. With 92% consensus, panelists strongly indicated that the definition of data quality should be included. And with a moderate level of recommendation, the theme principles of big data analysis, with 70%, was a new theme suggested by the panel in round 1 of the Delphi. It's also perhaps just important to note here that it wouldn't necessarily be within the scope of the curriculum to cover a detailed exploration of the various software packages available for data management, such as REDCap, or in terms of data analysis, programs like R or Stata, but to offer the overview and the core principles and the role that software packages can play within the field of data management or analysis. Next slide. Research team. So a total of 10 themes, of which half were strongly recommended. This module focuses on the interprofessional and interpersonal skills within the workplace, looking to optimize dynamics within the research team, indicated here by teamwork itself, rating highest with 86%, as well as clarity around the roles and responsibilities of study staff members, jointly alongside at 86%. Fostering collaborations also featured strongly with 80% consensus to include this theme, as well as guidance and principles for career development, registering at 78% consensus. However, less emphasis was placed on skills to underpin and strengthen leadership in research, as indicated at 67%, and correlates with the theme leading and managing complex research groups, which achieved the lowest level of consensus within this module. So from this, perhaps it is interesting to see what is viewed as essential skills versus those concepts which are considered more advanced or specialized skills. And a lot of the themes listed here originated from the formal gap analyses stage of the study, for which researchers considered the skills to support longer term development and sustainability of research teams. Next slide. So this next module, labeled Research Laboratories, contains a total of 9 themes, of which only 1 met with strong consensus for inclusion, and that was good clinical laboratory practice at the top with 79%. The themes listed are very lab specific, with a focus on safety and handling practices, sampling, storage, and quality. Now, in contrast to the ethics module, which was the most strongly rated across the framework, as a module, Research Laboratories cumulatively achieved the lowest level of consensus across the panel. So although we had high representation of trialists on the panel, 57% of our sample, we had low representation from laboratory staff on the panel, which only equated to 1%. Next slide. So study close is our next module and is informed by a total of 7 themes. Strong recommendations were expressed by panelists for guidance in measures to approach study conduct, particularly handling the data and samples appropriately at the end of the study, as can be seen with 87% consensus. However, within the module is also a keen focus on preparing manuscripts for publication. So from this list, 4 of the 7 themes are centered on the process and skills of writing scientific papers. Scientific writing features highly at 86% consensus, as do considerations regarding referencing, with best practices for referencing and plagiarism at 87%, and the use of citation tools registering 81%. Again, just to offer a little further insight, the 3 themes at the bottom of the table, authorship in research, research registries, and intellectual property rights, were new themes generated by the panel in round 1 of the Delphi. Next slide. So this module is titled Research Uptake, and the meaning that underpins this is how to make a difference with your research findings. 4 themes are included here to inform this module. Communicating research met the highest level of consensus within these themes at 92%. And there's also very strong consensus for upskilling researchers to engage with the science and policy interface, and thereby guiding and coaching researchers in best practice for effectively translating results into policy. You can see this here with 91% consensus, as well as skills that guide steps for the tangible uptake of research into clinical practice, highly noted with 85% consensus. With the lowest level of consensus at 56%, research indexing was again a new theme suggested by the panel in round 1 of the Delphi. And as an additional detail, we had only 1 panelist who indicated they were working directly in the field of research policy. So this is the final module in the proposed framework of 13. Next slide. And to conclude, we just want to briefly share with you some limitations. All good studies have limitations, and we're certainly not ignorant of ours. So with an aim of having a globally representative sample in terms of geography, across our panelists, we had 66% from low-income countries and low and middle-income countries combined, which gives a standalone low-income country sample size of only 9%. We also appreciate we had low stakeholder input, and as Arantxa said, that was therefore a core consideration for building this workshop, and your input strongly into the methodology of the process for concluding this curriculum. Within our sample, we're also aware we had high representation from researchers with backgrounds in clinical trials and epidemiological studies, and therefore underrepresented on those with experience in qualitative methodology studies. Due to the nature of the global pandemic, panelist recruitment was challenged and limited by the impact of COVID-19. And so we experienced some attrition of panelists between round 1 and round 2 of approximately 13%. And the final point to share is around the use and understanding of the term essential when describing and assessing the content of the curriculum, for which there appeared to be multiple interpretations. Next slide. So to conclude, we would like to extend our sincere thanks, firstly to all the participants and panelists who took part in this study and for generating such a rich pool of data to support the development of this curriculum, as well as to our funding partners who've given their support to the network and collaborated strongly on this research project. So thank you very much. Next slide. Great, so we'll now pause to take any questions or address any comments before progressing on with the interactive session. So I'll hand over to Trudy and Arantxa and Nicole. Thank you.
Well done, Bonnie. That was excellent. And Arantxa, that was 2 years worth of data spread across about 7 projects that they just took you through. So I hope you all managed to have a look at the briefing papers we sent before the meeting, because there's quite a lot to take through. And obviously, when we were planning this some time ago, we thought we'd have at least a day or possibly a 2-day meeting with you all in Geneva, and we could have gone over the data nice and carefully and slowly and had lots of discussions and breakout groups and so on. But restricted as we all are by our lives on Zoom, we've reduced this to this hour and a half gallop through. But I don't think this weakens this step in the process at all, because I think they've done a great job at presenting the data for you, and you can see the nice summary of those 13 headings that we've that have come through this research. And so what we're going to move into now is thinking about how we whether we think those are valid headings and the applicability of this. But before we go on and do that, which is really the sort of core business of us coming together today, I think we can take a few minutes now just to go, we can jump back through the slides. We've got our statistician here available. in fact, and even many people in the here today have been part of this process because they're part of these research groups that we work with. So, you know, we've got this great group of people here. You all represent some of the big funding institutions that have been involved with this, some of the research organisers that have been part of leading these programmes, and you're all equally aware of how valuable it would be if we could hypothetically come up with this essential curricula. So if you have any questions around the methodology and just going back over the data you've seen, and any bits you'd like to clarify, we've got some questions in the Q&A I'm just looking at now, which are great, and I'll come back to some of those, but I'm just giving you the opportunity to add some more into these, and do raise your hands as well, and we can take some questions. We've got about 15 minutes before we need to move on to the next stage, so so do jump in, and I'll come to you through this call. We've got some fantastic questions coming in here. Let's start with, I think we should jump to, well, first of all, we had a question around the representation from the countries, and I think you saw that in the data, just how representative this was.
I can help with that. If the percentage of stakeholders is 3%.
Very good. Thank you. And of course, you've all got the data that we sent you before the meeting, so you can also refer back to that. I'm just going to not in any systematic way, and also just let me reassure you, all the comments that we've had written in the Q&A, we will be collecting those. And although we can discuss some now, we will be considering all of them in the report that we write up, because obviously within the time we've got available and the constraints of working on Zoom, it's not possible to have a really systematic way of addressing needs now. So it will be done fully in the report. But I'm just going to flag up a couple of these now. Christiane, can we give you the mic, please? And could you, because I think that's a really good point you've brought up, and we can discuss this with you. Let's give Christiane the mic, because you've got a question about governance and regulation.
Hello, good morning, all of you. Thank you very much for inviting me to this interesting workshop. And I had a question about the section governance and regulation. I found it curious that the title of the section is equal to one of the categories that is listed, which was the only one that was rated high. And so I was wondering why this happened, and if it is to persist as a separate section. Perhaps this first category should be more specified as coordination, research coordination, or some more specific issues. And this is the one question. And the other one is about the methodology section. And I found curious that perhaps we could include comparative methods, comparative research, which is quite important in different fields. And so these are my two first questions. Thank you very much.
That's great. So I'm not going to go through and answer them all now, because I think we can capture those because they're really strong comments, and we're going to compile those all. If we've got time at the end, I might come back, but it'd just be great to hear from as many as possible now, because you explained them all so well. Please could we go to Mariam, because I think you raised an interesting point here, and then after Mariam, I would like to come to Gustavo. So Mariam, could you please have the mic? Go ahead, Mariam, I think you've got the mic. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you. Please make your comment.
Yeah, sorry. There's some background noise. I hope everyone can hear me clearly.
Absolutely fine. Go ahead.
So, okay, great. Thank you so much for involving me in this very relevant initiative. I'd gone through the draft that had, that had been shared with us. and I've also heard the summary presentations. I think the themes that have come up are all very useful. There is just one particular suggestion that it kept coming to my mind during the survey rounds as well, which was that the essential skill set would somewhat be dependent on the research track that one is taking. So a basic science research track would always be more lab heavy, and a clinical research track obviously focuses more on methodology and trial designs and study conducts and quality assurance mechanisms. um, and at least in my mind, the clinical and behavioral research is one pool. The epidemiological research can be grouped as part of that, but is generally different. And a basic science research is a somewhat different tangent. These are all parts of the same picture, but of course they are they are steps that follow each other in a sense. So perhaps eventually, when we come out with our recommendations, we would need to we would need to divide the required essential skill set according to the research track, that is basic versus clinical. That's probably the only suggestion I have at the moment.
Thank you. That's really nicely put, Mariam. And as I say, I'm not going to come back and answer them all now. I'll try and maybe come together with some at the end. I've got a few collective points to make. Let's go to Gustavo, if that's okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Gustavo. Lovely to see you.
Hello, good to see you. Hello, everyone. Thank you to be here. So there are two quick questions. One, I think that it's also related of the point that Christiane said about comparative methods. And so this is more specifically of the field of health systems analysis. I think that is a very, very important subject nowadays, and how to work in a comparative perspectives. So with different levels of health protection among countries, as universal health system or private health systems. So this is a very complex issue. And I think that it is important to highlight as a subject, as important subject. The second point is about the community engagement. In social science now, we are using the concept of engaged research. There are several dimensions and levels of community and social participation, even the level of the participant of the research. We can have, since the beginning of the organization and construction of the study protocol, since the evaluation or evaluation of impact on society. I think that this term nowadays represent better what we are saying about community engagement. It also is a cross-cutting dimension, because it's also ethical, it's also methodology, it's also about settings. So I think that it's a good it's just a suggestion how to work in a more broader perspective.
That's great, Gustavo. Thank you. Really, really important points there. Can I jump to Yodi next, and then I'd like to come to Pacifique. If we can give Yodi the mic, that would be good. You've made some two excellent points. It'd be good to hear both of them.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, very, very, very well.
I have three remarks. I don't know which one you're referring to, so if you don't mind, I mention all of them.
Yeah, go for it, because it just sounds, it just puts it all in better framework when you explain.
Okay, so the first one was about, there was one mentioning about good clinical practice, and what my suggestion is to broaden that into good research practice, because then it covers not just GCP, but also GCLP, good clinical laboratory practice, also good health research practice, good epidemiology practice, so many good practices out there which you could combine into good research practice. So that will be my first suggestion. Second suggestion, there was also somebody commenting, surprised about the operational research having such a low priority. I think we can consider putting implementation and operational research into one theme or one category, because they're very closely related. And also perhaps there's also a different understanding or interpretation of those two titles, two themes. So maybe just consider to bring them together. And then the last one, which I was mentioning, was that the number of the models, it's so big, and the themes are so many. So it's very difficult to imagine any single researcher being able to actually master all of them. So what I'm thinking is perhaps all of this should be geared more toward research team training instead of research individuals. So because many of these individuals will complement each other. So instead of asking an individual to master all of this, but asking several individuals to form a team having these different complementary skills. That's all, Trudy. Thank you.
That's great. I'm just collecting some responses that I think bring some of all this together. So just let's go to Pacifique, and then I'll see if I can bring some of this together before we move on. Pacifique, over to you.
Okay, hello, Trudy.
Hi.
Yes, hi. Okay, yes, I hope you are hearing me very well, because I'm having some noises around. I have a few comments I have already sent by the Q&A chat. So my first point is, I was also wondering if this is just a research training, a short course research training, or if it will be an academic program. Because as my colleague has just mentioned, we are having so many topics for one single researcher. And my other comment, I have just written them. The main one is about having a focus on open consent form, mainly on these biobanking initiatives that we are having these last days. And the other one is some profiles of researchers we are missing mainly in low and middle income countries, which is research administration and management. So if we can have more details on this during this in this curriculum, it will be fine. And the last one is about how to build a very good research team with a focus on how to calculate the level of effort. Because sometimes you have a big team, but at the end, you have very few people who are very committed on research implementation. Okay, thank you.
And that's great. And we heard you loud and clear, but I think we all want to be where you are, because it sounds much more fun than the rooms that most of us are in. That's fantastic. Look, they're excellent comments here. And just a couple of points to make before we move on. Most of the things you said are exactly the reason why we undertook this. It seemed an impossible task to say, look, can you come up with an essential curricula for research that would ensure that you can have a quality study that comes out of a setting where there's previously little research experience. And I'm so pleased this point about a team has come through, because that is exactly our concept, that research studies don't happen in isolation. And I think historically a lot of the focus on capacity building has focused on the individual, and often even just a PI or teams have been taught how to do one study and gather data for an external trial perhaps. And what we're really thinking about is how can we embed competencies and build lasting capable teams. And so it may well be that we offer the curricula, and this is something I hope we come back to at the end, how do we implement this, and that you offer this whole curricula to settings, and then that knowledge is imparted across the whole team. I think the point about that there's not that much as much as we'd expect on some of the areas like Q&A, audits, even laboratories and things like monitoring have come through a little quieter than perhaps I expected. I think the labs piece is quite interesting, because across the platform, we have a really high uptake of our laboratory resources. So I think it reflected the people taking part. And then in terms of things like audit, monitoring, QA, my suspicion there is for the huge group we had answering these questions, and those are the things about studies that perhaps none of us like as much, but know we have to do. So maybe they came a little lower because they're a little bit more of a chore, as essential as they are. And finally, I'm really pleased to hear this message about good research practice. And I think we really came at this because, you know, we all know that GCP is applied to all types of clinical research and not just clinical trials, but it's not very easy to apply to different settings. And what we are actually missing is the ability to ensure that every kind of healthcare study is done in such a way that is ethical, that is safe, and collects accurate and reliable data. And those basic principles, which are the Declaration of Helsinki and are there in GCP, are really difficult to apply to lots of other settings. There are a few other points within this about systematic reviews and audits and those wider. So I think at least our definition for this really is falling within health research studies where you're requiring consent and you're undertaking some form of activity with these participants. You're either performing a questionnaire, doing a survey, using their data for research, you are taking a sample, you're giving an intervention. And within that definition, you require a protocol and you have to take consent, and you're undertaking the collection of data for the prospective purposes of publication. You know, that definition of what research is. And I think that's a good point. We need to really clarify that definition. And we've just used the WHO definition for health research within this process, but we do need to make sure we're really clear about that at the beginning. So I think in summary, I completely agree. This is about training for whole teams, which will obviously usually be broken down across that team to make it manageable. This is all around ensuring ethical, safe and accurate practices in research, which goes beyond GCP to good research practice and is the support for delivering that. And we really set out to do this in the absence of anything else. You know, there isn't a list of training that you should and could deliver to a site. So in the absence of nothing, this is where we've made an attempt at this. And so what will be interesting to see in half an hour or so when we get to the end is whether you feel that this is a strong enough attempt to have this sensible list of topics that we can bring together as this curricula. So I think that's quite a good segue into talking about the poll now. So I think we're bang on time, right, team? So if I switch over to handing you back to Bonnie. I think we're on the next slide, please, George, and over to you, Bonnie.
Thanks, Trudy. So yes, we'll now move on with the session into our polling exercise. If we could have the next slide, George. Great. So as stakeholders, we are very keen to seek your input and your feedback to this proposed curriculum framework. And for that, we've devised 4 questions that address 2 key objectives. And obviously, hopefully this is an opportunity for us to build on the comments and questions you've already submitted within the Q&A and verbally, but also an opportunity to reinforce some of those as well through this exercise. So the first objective is to validate the proposed module framework we've presented to you. And 2 questions will underpin this first objective. Question 1, are these module titles an accurate reflection of the content of the themes? And question 2, does this framework address the key essential principles of the research process? So the polling will then move on to address the second objective, which explores the global applicability of the findings. And 2 further questions will underpin this second objective. Question 3, is this proposed curriculum framework globally applicable? And question 4, would this proposed curriculum be relevant to different types of research? So let's move on to the instructions for how you can participate in this. Thank you, George. So the 4 polling questions will be presented one at a time. The question will pop up and appear in the middle of your screen. And for each question, a yes/no option answer will be displayed. Once all participants have answered the question, we will share the results of the poll with you all. before moving on to the next question. And what's important to note here, though, is that for those of you who select no as your answer, we kindly ask you to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens to share your reasons for why. So if you wish to answer no, if you wish to disagree, we're really keen to hear why. So on that note, let's begin. Next slide, please, George. And the first polling question is launching now. And hopefully you can all see this now on your screens. So this is question 1. Are these titles an accurate reflection of the content of the themes? So please take a moment. There's no immediate rush. Please answer the question. And again, if you wish to choose no, please use that Q&A function to tell us why.
Thanks, Bonnie. And this is, of course, just the groupings we made from those data to try and create them into sensible topics that we could eventually can be used to develop training courses and tools around, and would be appropriate terminology and what people would readily understand as being applicable to that area. So I hope it's quite a straightforward practical question, this one, and something to hopefully we can take forward into usable topic headings when we come to talk about implementation later. I think we're nearly there. So I think we'll just another few people left to vote. If we have undecideds, but I think it's quite a clear outcome on this one. So we'll just give you another couple of minutes, easing you in gently with hopefully a quite straightforward practical question on this one. Good. I don't know if anybody's having.
If anyone is having any difficulties, please do let us know. We can assist. It might be a little bit difficult if you're joining by phone.
Yes, and we understand as well that it's we ran through the data very quickly, and these are you need to look back at the data to answer these. So there is an opportunity as well. If you haven't voted and still have a comment, that's completely fine as well. So don't feel you have to vote if you're not completely comfortable with the data yet. So that's fine. So I think we'll just give that another couple of seconds, around 2 minutes, and then let's close that one. Should we, Bonnie?
Yes. Okay.
I feel like a game show host.
Okay, so I've ended the polling. I'm just going to share the results so you can all see how everyone voted.
I feel like you need a drum roll for this. So that's a clear yes for that. So that's excellent. And we'll come back and put all the results up together at the end. So so excellent. Right, that was a nice practice question to get you all warmed up. It's like a Christmas quiz, isn't it? Should we go to the next question, please? Then next slide, please, George. Okay, Bonnie.
So poll number 2 coming up now.
So this one is really around what I was just discussing earlier around, the Declaration of Helsinki says that it's really important that all research is obviously conducted ethically. It protects the safety of the participants in the study, but also anybody who's going to be subject to interventions based on the study in the longer term. And obviously the data is accurate and reliable. And so broadly, that's what we're all trying to achieve with any research study. And so what we're trying to impart across this curricula is if this curricula is imparted across the whole team, would that ensure that any study involving human subject is ethical, safe and accurate? So everybody's got the hang of this now, fast voting going on this time. So if you want to have a quick look back over the slides Bonnie sent, and obviously, of course, it's around the safety, efficacy and the safety ethics and accuracy, but it's also around all those core areas that we've really grouped those themes into. Is there anything major missing? The piece that I'm quite pleased came through this was around adding in those wider skills about managing budgets and teams and having leadership capabilities. Those sometimes they're called soft skills, which always winds me up because they're not soft at all. And I think if you want to run good clinical research, then you need to have good leadership practices and team management skills in place as well. And that's very important that came through. Good. I think we're pretty much on the same number that voted last time. So I think we could probably assume that those who haven't voted are probably working on their phone. So we're on about 80% of people have voted. Okay, so I think we'll close that one now. Do you want to share the results?
Okay, sharing results now. Everyone should be able to see.
Yeah, so that was 100% agreement on that one. So that's reassuring. And again, if you've got any comments or caveats or points you want to make, please do put them into the Q&A and we'll make sure that they are captured. Excellent. Okay. Very good.
Thank you, George. So poll 3 coming up now. It should have just appeared on everyone's screen. So this is question 3. Is this proposed curriculum globally applicable?
So we think this is a really important question because the whole intent really is that research, there's so much inequity in health research across the globe. You know, we're still in a situation where 90% of the world's research happens to benefit just 10% of the global population. There's so many places where research experience and capabilities just aren't there. And so it's, we believe if we can develop this curricula that is, we can find ways to make it, people can take it up and implement it in different settings. Obviously things like language are a huge barrier. And it would be really good to hear what you all think. We've got fantastic global representation in this call, and of course we really tried hard to get global representation in the participants you've heard from so far. And so if you are voting no for this, we really want to hear you tell us why you think that is, because hopefully that's something that we will absolutely pull into the report and see if we can find solutions as well, because this has to be globally applicable, because this is all about addressing the inequities that exist in health research. So we'll just give you all a few more minutes. We're nearly up to the same number who voted. Bonnie, do you think we might get offered a job hosting a game show after this? Or the Christmas pub quiz, maybe? Good, I think that's the same number as voted before. So should we go on to the, should we show the results? Slightly.
Sure, yes, I'll just end this polling now. And here come the results.
So that's interesting. So we've got a few people have to think that it isn't globally applicable. So that's excellent. You've expressed that view. Really, really important. And please do write in the Q&A your thoughts on that, because that's really, really important for us to capture, because this is very, very key to the whole applicability and how useful this whole study is going to be. So that's great. Excellent. Drum roll for the final question.
Thank you, George. Okay, so poll number 4 is launching now. Hopefully this has now appeared on your screens.
Yeah, so this is a good question, isn't it, for covering those things we've talked about. So one of our main positions when we came to do this research was to say that every single piece of health research is important, in whether it's everyday disease of poverty, whether it's ongoing issues like malaria, TB, childhood illnesses, early mortality from whatever diseases are affecting the community, or of course outbreaks. We need that whole spectrum of research, and it's but within the definition of what clinical health research is. And so what we've really tried to do here is create a curriculum that you can apply to observational interviewing, social science, clinical trials, and have tried, in the absence of anything else, to come up with a curriculum that could work in all of those settings. So again, I think this is the most challenging, trying to do everything and not make it overwhelming is probably the most difficult challenge that this offers. So really important to ask this question, and also for you to tell us if you think that it does have difficulties in some areas where it's a clinical study that requires consent in a protocol. What makes this curriculum not applicable to those? So I think we've got a couple more people to vote. This is good. It means you're all thinking about it. It's probably the hardest question we've saved till last. So really important to think about that. And so if you are answering no, please give us as comprehensive a reasoning for that as you can, either in the Q&A. And of course, we should have said earlier as well, it's also, you know, we'd love to hear from you on email if you want to write more, if it's a bit constrained within the time we've got today. So feel free to follow up with us on this as well outside of this call, because we're going to be working on this obviously for the next few weeks and generating this report. So feel free to comment. Okay, that's everyone voted, I think, from what we've had before. Do you want to share the findings on that? That's great.
Here we go.
Excellent. Well, that's a really important outcome as well. That's really good to see that spread of views there. And the answers again for the yeses and the no votes, of course, would be really interesting to hear. I think especially as we've got a bit more of a spread here, it would be good to hear from those who do think it's globally applicable why that is true, and equally for those who think this wouldn't work for different types of studies. Please explain why, and we can explore that in the writing up of this, because that's really, really key. Good. So that was the last question, right?
That was. Thank you very much.
Good, thanks everyone. Okay, so we've got about 20 minutes left, so this is all working really nicely to time. So imagine we're all in a room now, we've probably had a cup of tea and grabbed a break, come back in, time to scratch our heads and put our thinking caps on. So what we'll do now is just open up again using the QA facility, and do raise your hand. If you're raising your hand, it'd be just really helpful just to drop a couple of words in the chat function about what the point you'd like to make. It'd be really interesting to hear back from some of the voting decisions there, and just hear some of your feedback come to life there. What we'd like to do here is just think about really where we go from here. Our plan is now to fully write up this whole study, and this today is obviously an important step in that. And really the question then is looking forward and thinking that if we do have what is now, you know, this proposed curricula for research, how can we take that forward? What would we need to do to refine that and write that up within, you know, having a curriculum as these topic guides? How then could it be implemented? You know, we with the Global Health Network, we've been running online training and workshops for the last decade, and we've got quite a good complement of those topics already covered within the training we offer. There are some gaps, and obviously our aim is to make online training available for free, and also to have to work with our partners in the regions and have workshops to deliver these trainings. But what else could be done, and how could these things be implemented? But also the point we want to make is that this is a partnership project we've done with TDR. It's been fantastic working with them. We've got numerous other activities along the same area that we work on with them, such as the core competency framework, which this is built from. And we will make all these data available, and obviously completely, you know, this will be a published curricula there for anybody to take and use and take into their programs however they like. And equally, if we develop any tools and resources, they'll always be open and for everybody to use. So we will release the data sets, and we'll release the curriculum and all the information we have around it. So what's been really fantastic today is to see the range of people we have at this meeting and the organisations that you represent. So some thoughts about how we take this forward would be really welcome. So I'm going to go first to Glory, if that's okay, and then if my co-panelists could help point at, there's so many questions now, it's a bit hard to speak and field them at the same time, so I'll allow my panelists to help me prompt. But Glory, lovely to hear from you. Over to you.
Thanks so very much. I'm happy for being invited to be part of this global study and also to participate in this meeting. I would want to suggest that looking at these essential skill sets, considering the various level of skill, knowledge, and experience of the members of the research team, and looking at the outcome of the study so far, wherein we have some of the curriculum contents that are strongly recommended, some that have medium recommendation, and some that have weak recommendation. I suggest that the whole curriculum should be divided into three sessions. The first session will be the must know. And that must know will coincide or correspond with the basic curriculum. And the basic curriculum or the must know will correspond with those contents that the various participants recommend as strong. Then the second part of the curriculum should know. And that should know should be the intermediate part of the curriculum. And that intermediate part of the curriculum will correspond with those contents that participants grade as medium recommendation. And then we have the third part of the curriculum, which is the may know. And that may know will be the advanced section of the curriculum. And that advanced section of the curriculum will correspond with those contents that participants have weak recommendation for. In this way, the different members of the team who may already have great experience and knowledge may just focus on the may know or the advanced, and those that are just coming up may have to focus on the must know instead of having to cover the whole curriculum. This is my suggestion. Thank you.
That's great, Glory. Thank you. Really excellent comments. I like the grouping. We'll take them all. I just want to try and get as many people in as possible. Could we go to Jacqueline next, and then Roxana?
Hello everybody. Well, my comment is related to the informal way to transfer these research skills such as the mentorship, which is an effective way to transfer from one generation to another, and how we could ensure that through this curriculum, the institutions could promote adequate spaces and resources to ensure an effective mentorship. I understand the mentorship is an informal way, but I know that it's very effective, and I really would like to see how this could be strengthened, because in my institution, for example, it's very difficult to do an effective mentorship for lack of time and spaces and resources. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jacqueline. And I think with lots of the projects we work within, as you know, we're trying to do mentorship schemes between settings with high experience and low experience. And that's something I think maybe we could build into this further. So that's a really, really good suggestion. Could we go to Joseph Bonney, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Nice to meet you, Joseph. Thank you for joining.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. So this is Joe from Ghana. My thoughts were that if we're doing the online course, then yes, the structure fits perfectly. But if we could adapt these courses to be delivered in person, it would also give a different feel for the training. A lot of people take online courses really very leisurely. But if we're doing this in person, I think that this will really be beneficial. And if we had to do it in person, I am thinking of a trainer of trainers course to train people on how to deliver this, or have the researchers work along with very experienced people to deliver these courses in-house. This will mean that they can use local experiences, local examples, but still maintaining the full standards of the course. And then also, let me throw this in that we should look at adding in proper certifications or certificate that is recognized by a local university as you go along these courses, so a diploma of some sort. Thank you.
Great points, Joe. Thank you. And I think the idea would be, that these can be made available online in a relatively straightforward way to complete this set of training, but that there could be toolkits as well, so that they can be downloaded and used to train in person, and so sort of trainer kits, and perhaps through some of the networks, trainer sessions as well, which could even be online, and then people deliver them face to face if they're experienced. But that's exactly what we really want some of ideas around today, is how do we take this forward and implement it now? So that's just excellent. Thank you, Joe. Good to hear that. Can we just jump across the globe now to Lee Jones, who's joining us from the warmth from Asia. Lee, can we hear from you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, go for it. Thanks for joining.
Excellent. Yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, this whole exercise is really, really great. And I think it's going to be particularly useful for our setting in Vietnam. So in Vietnam, for example, where we work, we have a tropical disease hospital. And I think what is often overlooked is a lot of the staff who are involved in research, the nurses, the junior administrators, and maybe some of the monitors, etc., in the clinical trials units, are often expected to do these very, very important tasks on a daily basis. And often they're kind of overlooked and they don't get a good buy-in of the whole process. And I think this is a real oversight, and something like this course would be incredibly useful to promote buy-in at all levels, particularly in regards to things like good research practice, research integrity, and really understanding why all these things are so critical to ensure the delivery of a research project overall, and that their role in that process is every bit as important as the people further up the chain. So I think this is going to be really critical, and is something that we've talked about at various levels. But to have something like this pulled together on an evidence basis, and something, as mentioned previously, about adapting that slightly for a face-to-face delivery and doing a train the trainers, this could really work into something that's incredibly important, particularly for our setting out here. That's all. Thank you.
That's great, Lee. Thank you very much. I'm just really keen to squeeze in a few more. So can we come to Mahesh next, please, and then Oscar?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Very nice to have you here, Mahesh.
Hi, Trudy, and hi, everybody. I sent my comments also in question and answer chat. I agreed with all the questions that you asked, but I had few observations about the themes. I find that there were some duplications in the research methodology section, for example, because if you could reduce those duplications, then it would be the number of the themes could be reduced as well. For example, in research methodology section, there is a separate theme for selection of control group for comparison purpose. I think this is redundant because for every study design, you need to have a sense of how to select control. So instead of dealing with it as a separate theme, because we have mentioned so many different designs, this part would be an essential component of this design, so it can be taken out. Similarly, there are mentions of implementation and operation research. I think they are very similar, and therefore an implementation research may suffice. And nowadays, the embedded research is also coming as a part of implementation research, in which the government is very much involved from the very beginning, because ultimately in implementation operation research, the findings has to be translated to policy. So if the governments are involved from the very beginning, it is called embedded research. So this is something for to think about. And also there's mention of clinical trial and experimental research. I think just to keep experimental research would be sufficient, because it includes clinical trial. And also it would include randomized community trials and also quasi-experimental studies. So instead of making these duplications, I think we can reduce the number of the themes. Second, in protocol design, there's a, instead of this is a mention of a definition and method of randomization. So why only randomization? Because if you are doing all this design, then not only randomization, but there could be observational studies, and there are many situations in which you cannot do randomization. So rather than giving emphasis on randomization, we may just say study design, which will involve, if it is more like a clinical trial and randomized community trials, we'll do randomization. If it is observational studies, we'll go without randomization. So that may be something to think about. And finally, in research team, the leadership in research may suffice for many of the, that is broken into many sub-themes there. So for example, networking and how to create collaboration is a part of leadership. Ability to communicate and meet with funders is also a part of leadership. Handling and negotiating, influencing institutional level, leading and managing. So all these are part of leadership. So just by mentioning leadership in research may be sufficient. So these are my 3 observations. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, they're excellent. Thank you very much. Right, I think we've got time for 2 more quick comments, and then we'll wrap up and make sure we finish on time. This has been excellent. So can I go to Roxana, please, and then we'll finish with Oscar. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi Roxana, lovely to see you here.
Delighted to learn with all of these experts around the world and be able to share a little of what we have seen in our part of the world, South America, Central and South America. So I was wondering, your original question was, how do we put these principles or this framework into practice? And I was thinking about the national science foundations of our countries, because they are the ones, whether their budget is limited or not, they are the ones who are most interested in getting their research done properly. In Peru, for example, we got the National Science Foundation to require all of their grantees to get a certificate in research integrity. So they would be the ones to perhaps be able to require a minimum list of skills, as the first speaker mentioned, a list of must do for skills. And on the second level, not second level, but additionally, because the National Science Foundations can only make requirements for the institutions that they provide grants to, or for the investigators, but they have no control for all the universities. So in order to get to the universities, perhaps starting with the master's levels, maybe make a similar suggestion, no? Start small, must have, and then increase the level of courses. I think this is a tremendous contribution to the research.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oscar, quick point from you, and then we'll wrap up. Thanks, Roxana.
All right. Thank you very much, Tim and Trudy, for this quite informative workshop. And my contribution is really, has actually been mentioned by the previous, by Roxana. But what I wanted to just add on is that I think there is also, it's important to have a clear path in terms of, career progression. One of the challenges that, we face, at least in Zimbabwe, is that you have people, you have people who don't have a clear path. There's no clear career path as a researcher, and of course part of it is emanates from this training. And I'm looking at this training, or as this curriculum, as one of the drivers, or as one of the key components that could actually provide that clarity of a clear career path, career can I say trajectory for researchers. But in addition, I think it has to be coupled a lot with a lot of experience, which brings in the issue of mentorship. And I think here this is important to have mentorship, practical skills, and and oversight over studies.
That's great, Oscar. That's such a great way to end the career path point, because that's really how we came to this with TDR, because we began work with them all these years ago, trying to come up with a competency framework to build a career path on, and then we realized there was a gap in actually knowing how to fill that with training, and so that brings us all the way back round. So this is perfect. We've just got a couple of minutes to finish up now. Can I have the last slide, please, George? And then I'm going to hand to Pascal in a minute to close. What we will do now is we will pull all this together. We're going to write a final report. We're also going to, this has been a closed workshop with you all because we wanted to have this opportunity to really go in detail into these findings and interrogate them really carefully with this selected group. But we are going to run an open session now to complete this process and invite all the people that have been involved and open it up across the community that we can access through the Global Health Network, and hopefully through all you as well, and all these incredible networks that we've been working with through this whole project. So we'll run that open session and then finalise the report. And then the hard work begins of seeing how we can work with many of you, we hope, to implement this going forward. So with 2 minutes left, trying to stick to time, I shall thank you all very much for your time and contributions. Please write in anything else you'd like to say. And we're really grateful in this busy time and this very difficult year we've all had for you to put time to this. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to my team. You've done an incredible job with this. It's just 2 years worth of work presented in this session. So it's been amazing to see it. And Pascal, over to you to do the wrapping up for us.
Yeah, I will be short. I think I would thank everyone for the number of the intervention and the quality of the intervention. I think it's really great. I think I heard what you are saying, even if some of you have some concern about the applicability of this curriculum to the different type of research. I think we can work on that. I think it's really important, but the fact that the content of the teams are accurate and that it's addressed the key essential principle for a researcher is really great. So again, thank you for your participation and for your high level of participation. As I said, in the number of interventions, but also quality. Thank you very much. And I would like also to thank the Global Health Network team who organized this workshop. And I think it was really great. It was smooth and really friendly. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thanks, Pascal. That's great. Well, thank you for hosting, and we look forward to taking forward the next steps. So we finish on time. So thank you everyone for taking part. It's been a really rich session and we've got so much great information from you.
Yeah.
We look forward to sharing the report with you. Thank you very much, TDR, for hosting, and thanks to the team and everybody. Happy relaxing holidays for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.